A spaceport very much like an international airport. Our Insat 2E that we saw in our opening titles, very much like a plane soon to take off, but of course vertically from pad number ELA2. So fasten your seatbelt. Here we go. Ariane Space Flight 117 for the Indian Space Research Organization. Welcome to Kourou, where once again, as we see, another Ariane launcher is about to lift off.
Good evening to all of you as well from Juan de Dalmau, speaking from Kourou to wherever you may be watching us in French Guiana, in Europe, the United States or India. We are go. The weather is very cloudy here in Kourou, but still go for liftoff in less than 24 minutes now.
We'll be watching that little green countdown clock in the top right-hand corner. So long as it remains on the green background, then we're go for launch. The weather, as you said, some uncertainty throughout the day. We're at the start of the long rainy season here in French Guiana, but we believe that conditions will be a-okay to lift off in 22 minutes' time.
Right, weather is okay, and this is in fact already the 7th satellite that Ariane is going to carry into space for India. It is a long-standing cooperation with Europe that started 17 years ago with the launch of the Apple satellite for India in 1981.
Let's go back now, just over a month ago, 26th of February to be precise, for the first Ariane space flight of the year.
On 26 February this year, an Ariane 4 launcher was carrying 2 telecommunications spacecraft into space. One of them was Skynet 4E for the British Ministry of Defence, telecommunications. And the other one was for the Arab League, Arabsat 3A, also telecommunications. They were both placed, as usual, in a very accurate transfer orbit above the equator. Both satellites are today about to complete the orbital tests and will be commissioned in the coming days. The accurate delivery into orbit, of course, has as a direct consequence an extended lifetime of the satellites.
And of course, we hope to be fulfilling the same target, getting Insat 2E precisely up to the desired orbit. 21 minutes and 14 seconds.
All systems go, or green in our language.
The status panels, which are up against the wall in front of everybody here, in front of the operational teams and the invited guests.
Blue means that the operations still have to be performed. So they are progressively moving from blue to green. And we would like to show you now what the launch pad looked this afternoon, about 5 hours ago, when the launch gantry protecting the launcher was withdrawn to allow for the beginning of the fueling operations of the 3rd stage. Here is the launcher with its 54-meter high and more than 330 tons at liftoff. The particular configuration today has 2 solid strap-on boosters on each side of the main stage. The launcher hardware has been manufactured by some 36 aerospace firms throughout Europe, and it has 3 stages. The top stage has been fueled and is still being topped up right now, and Insat, with its 2.5 tons, is sitting inside the fairing on the top of the launch vehicle. This was shot, as you can see, this afternoon. Now it is already night in Kourou, and the clouds were casting all of the sky.
It's the 12th time we use a 42P.
And the launch azimuth today will be due east. So we're moving directly towards India,
and the launch window, that's the period in which we have to lift off, a window that is 50 minutes long, and the corresponding time shown around the world shown on screen now.
We would like to give special greetings to our TV viewers through the Doordarshan station television in India. And the Coming explanations now will be to illustrate how the satellite, the Insat 2E, and the launcher have been prepared here. Please don't worry about the small flames on the foot of the launcher. We will tell you what they are for. Pierre Ribardier here is the Range Operations Manager of CNES at the Guyana Space Center. One of the ISRO team managers, Mr. Bhaskara Narayana from ISRO, is leading his team and monitoring the satellite, sitting next to Mr. Dhanabalan in Jupiter Mission Control.
These two campaigns now, let's review them with the mission director, Rémi Cochet. He went out to the service gantry to the 62-meter level on day -4, whilst operations were still proceeding.
We are currently at the payload level on the launch area number 2, in front of the upper part where the satellite is contained, Insat 2E being the passenger of this flight 117. The launch itself, which carries this satellite, took its shape a few weeks ago, a kilometer from here in the assembly building. The cruise started with the mating of the first stage, then the second, and at last the third stage. And everything was checked before the rollout to the pad. This morning, we are at D-4. Early, the satellite was hoisted to the top of the launcher. The teams you can see behind me are finalizing the vehicle equipment bay before it is closed. Then we'll have to undergo some electrical tests at D-3 and D-2, and we'll start filling the launcher before the final countdown. A few words about our passenger Insat. It was processed in the payload preparation complex, filled with propellants by the Insat team, and finally closed, or as we say, encapsulated inside the fairing 2 days ago, before being transferred here at the top of the launcher.
Back live with you, and we've had 5 days since this last clip was shot. What has happened since? There was a general review, a launch readiness review 3 days ago. Here is Jean-Marie Luton.
He is the flight director for this mission, the final authority in the command chain.
Alain Bensoussan, chairman, president of CNES, the French space agency, which has long ties with ISRO in cooperative programs.
Let's now evoke the history of the Insat 2 satellite program, the design and the construction of Ariane's passenger tonight.
The Indian National Satellite System, one of the largest domestic communications satellite systems in the world today. The second generation of Insat satellites were designed and built by the ISRO's Satellite Center at Bangalore. Insat 2E, the last of the second generation of Insat satellites, is the most advanced satellite built so far in terms of technologies used in the mechanical and electronic hardware and the state-of-the-art payloads. The state-of-the-art gallium arsenide over germanium cells are used in fabricating the solar panels to generate a higher power of about 2,240 watts to meet the spacecraft power demands with adequate margin. Insat 2E has a cuboid structure built around a corrugated thrust-bearing central cylinder which houses inside it the spherical fuel and oxidizer tanks. The payloads and the mainframe packages have been mounted on the equipment panels and the decks. The detailed integrated spacecraft test after the assembly of all hardware was followed by the thermo-vacuum test in the large space simulation chamber. The thermal design was further validated under a specially conducted thermal balance test, including sun simulation, simulating the in-orbit thermal audit. Embedded heat pipe panels have been used for the first time for efficient thermal control. The deployable appendages like the solar array, the solar sail, and the antenna reflectors were integrated, and pre-dynamic deployment tests were conducted. To compensate for the seasonal variation in solar pressure torque, solar flap has been added at the tip of the solar array. The satellite underwent the dynamic tests, which included vibration and acoustic tests. The acoustic test was conducted at the acoustic test facility available with the National Aerospace Laboratories. The satellite was airlifted to French Guiana in specially designed containers with utmost care and precision by a special cargo aircraft on 13th February for launch on board an Ariane 4 vehicle from Kourou. The realization of Insat 2E has posed many technological challenges and has provided an enriching experience and has become the forerunner to the third generation Insat 3 satellites. The launching and commissioning of Insat 2E will mark the beginning of a new era of long-life mission satellites under the Indian space program.
A multi-purpose mission, telecommunications, television and meteorology, which we'll be talking about later on in our program.
The teams we see on and off on our screens have started working for this particular flight 6 weeks ago with the preparation of Insat, and about 4 weeks ago with the preparation of the launcher. On the right-hand image is Yves Bondil from Ariane, the launcher operations manager, leading his crew at the firing room only 1 kilometer away from the launch pad. And on the left-hand side is Mission Control Jupiter, where all the operations coordination is performed, and from where we are speaking to you. We are located at about 14 kilometers from the pad.
There are about 1,500 people working here at the European spaceport. About a third of them are involved in Ariane space launch activities directly, under the responsibility of Bernard Donat. He's the Ariane space head of establishment here, and with parallel campaigns and improvements actually underway to the ground facilities, there's a lot to look after.
We are next to the Flight 118 launcher at the first stage engines level. You can see two crews working at the preparation of the engine for the launch. We have a team of around 500 permanent staff in French Guiana. And for each campaign, we have an additional 70 persons coming from the European companies building the launcher. They come here to work on the launcher until the final operations and liftoff. The year started slowly since we had our first launch at the end of February, though we are planning for 10 to 11 Ariane 4 and 3 Ariane 5 this year. But we'll speed up in April, since we launch Flight 117 on April 2nd, Flight 118 on April 28th. Then we hope to launch Ariane 5 during the month of June. The great challenge today is to launch these 3 Ariane 5 and thus demonstrate we can increase the launch rate with Ariane 5. With Ariane 5 we hope to have a dual launch each time. With the launch of 2 satellites at a time, the difficult task will be the preparation of the satellites. So we need a new facility to process this growing number of payloads.
Right, 9 minutes and 35 seconds to go. Juan, I think you're still listening in to the last meteor report, which is at the nominal minus 10 minutes. Here we see a map of the weather situation, which you'll be explaining in just a moment. The Jupiter Mission Control Center is filled with internal audio circuits linking all the operational teams and linking us obviously with the Launch Operations Center, which is a kilometer from the pad. All the status panels are green, so conditions appear to be still good for liftoff. We'll be having the details of the weather in just a moment. 8 minutes and some 50 seconds to go. At the 6-minute mark, we'll be entering an automatic sequence, which we'll be explaining when it comes. There again, we see Yves Bondil on the right-hand side, part of the Insat team on the left-hand side, and our launcher behind. Here now a shot of the tracking station not far from Kourou, where the telemetry from the launcher arrives in real time, and it's the facility where one has the first details of how the launcher will be flying and rising. This information is relayed to the Jupiter Mission Control Center. The Insat team are monitoring their satellite. The batteries of their satellite were charged. They started charging the batteries some 6.5 hours ago. A very gentle procedure to make sure these batteries are charged fully for the period in which the satellite will depend entirely upon them before it opens its solar panels. You have some information, Juan, on the weather?
Yes, indeed. We had a very detailed briefing a minute ago, and we can say that all of the meteorological criteria are go for liftoff, provided that liftoff occurs at the expected liftoff time, which is in 6 minutes and 50 seconds now. The cloud coverage is still very heavy, so we hope that we can launch within the first 10 minutes of the launch window today, of the launch opportunity, which is quite comfortable because it is 50 minutes long.
Right, Pierre Ribardière, the launch range manager, about to announce the 6-minute mark, and from that moment on things will be entirely under the control of 2 computers in the Launch Control Center.
We should have the announcement of the -6-minute mark.
À tous de l'EDO, attention pour le début de la séquence synchronisée de lancement. Top, moins 6 minutes.
Right, now perhaps, Juan, you can explain to everybody why we need an automatic sequence during this last final run.
Yes, if we want to respect the scheduled liftoff time, there is a high number of checkouts and of commands sent to the launcher that have to be done in a very reliable and very fast manner. And the best way to do that is through automated systems that are controlled from the firing room or firing room building at only 1,000 meters from the launch pad. On and off, we are seeing shots from the launcher with flames in the lower part. That is actually not happening at the foot of the launcher, but is happening a few hundred meters behind the launcher. It's just an optical illusion. And those flames are the results of burning the excess gaseous hydrogen that is being used for the topping up of the Ariane 4 third stage. Here we see this shot again. Some vapor clouds are coming out of the feeding lines because through them there are very low temperature hydrogen and oxygen in liquid state, because they are at below -200 degrees Celsius, to make sure that the maximum quantity of propellants are into the stage. Dr. Kasturi Rangan, the chairman of ISRO, Indian Space Research Organization, and again the range operations manager, who looks quite confident for a liftoff in less than 4 minutes and 20 seconds now.
I suppose that once the reservoirs, the oxygen, liquid hydrogen reservoirs are topped up, then they are closed and pressurized. Is that the procedure?
Yes, some of the main operations happening right now are the pressurization to flight values of both hydrogen and oxygen tanks, Martin, as you say. Other key operations being performed right now are the switchover of electrical power feeding of the Insat spacecraft from ground feeding to onboard power, and that has already been confirmed. The launch vehicle itself is performing a similar operation right now, switching over to onboard battery power. And another crucial operation that we hope everyone can see close to ignition time will be the release of the two cryogenic feeding arms that are shown with two different cameras at the level of the third stage, and they run from the umbilical tower on the right to the third stage on the left.
I always think it's a rather poetic scene. It's as though these two arms are holding the launcher as though they did not want it to lift off. But
you could say so, yes, Martin. And we're mentioning a lot the third stage, but we have to talk a bit more about the first and second stages, and that will be done after liftoff.
The president of CNES there, long ties we mentioned some time ago with ISRO and future projects, including a project that will directly interest India and the tropical regions, a project to study the movement of water around the tropics, whether it be in the oceans, the atmosphere, or on dry land, a project called Megatropics, which will be starting shortly. Monsieur Luton, watching proceedings there. 2 minutes coming up. In the center, we see Jean-François Lemonnier. He's the payload manager for Ariane Space.
And responsible for the launch service contract with ISRO. Minus 1 minute, 47 seconds and counting. All systems go for ignition of the 4 main stage engines, which will be followed by some 3 seconds of checkout, automated checkout procedure before liftoff, until the computer system gives green light to the ignition of the 2 solid strap-on boosters and simultaneously the release of the launch platform jaws or clamps, which will allow for liftoff.
Right, the last 60 seconds.
À tous de l'EDO, attention pour H-1 minute. Top, moins 1 minute et des comptes.
Right, our launcher beautifully illuminated out there on the second European launch pad. Remember, here we have pad number 3, from which the Ariane 5 launcher lifts off. 43 seconds to go in the Jupiter mission control. Some people going out onto the balconies to see the liftoff with their own eyes. Let's now sit tight and appreciate the liftoff of Ariane Flight 117 with ISRO's Insat 2E, telecoms, television and meteorology for India and the whole of Asia.
À tous de l'EDO, attention pour le décompte final. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, unité, feu. Allumage. Décollage. Tous les paramètres bord.
Right, our launcher is off. Characteristic white plume of the solid propellant boosters.
We're trying to see the launcher through the telescopes. We hope that they can see in the clear spots through the clouds.
Extinction des propulseurs d'appoint.
We have shut down of those solid propellant boosters, which has been announced.
Yes, they only give propulsion for less than a minute.
Tous les paramètres bord sont normaux et la trajectoire est normale.
All parameters are normal, all systems normal on board, as you can hear from the range operations manager.
And since our launcher has disappeared from sight, perhaps we can explain on screen first of all, the curve. It's the nominal trajectory that we'll be following, and the little white dot that represents our
Tous les
launcher.
paramètres bord sont normaux.
And on the right-hand side, some figures, altitude and velocity, which we see, I think, Juan?
Right, if we start from the bottom line on the right, velocity is in kilometers per
Tous les
second and
paramètres
will
bord
be
sont normaux.
rising very quickly. Just above the line on altitude, symbolized with an A, very rapidly increasing velocity, and we can have some
Largage des
pictures
propulseurs d'appoint.
of the launcher through telescopes. We just had confirmation of jettisoning of the two strap-on boosters. They will now fall on the ground inside the safety area of the Guyana Space Center, and they have been manufactured in Italy by Fiat Avio.
And even inside our commentary positions here in the Jupiter building, we can hear the rumble, the very low rumble of the launch vehicle as it passes not far off,
Les
heading
paramètres
out
bord sont
eastwards
normaux et la
across the
trajectoire est
Atlantic.
normale.
Now, propulsion of the launcher is being assured by the first stage with its 4 engines. It is consuming more than 220 tons of propellants in a few minutes.
That makes it practically more than 1 ton of propellant every second.
Les paramètres bord sont normaux et la trajectoire est normale.
The nominal flight path on the left-hand side is being followed very accurately by the launcher. All this information is coming to us through radar and through telemetry receiving stations. The first of them is located right here on the Guyana Space Center, but will be followed up by some other
Les
downrange
paramètres bord
stations.
sont normaux et la trajectoire est normale.
As we follow the ascension of our launcher, we'll be mentioning the different industrial companies that have contributed. At the moment, the first stage is the responsibility of France's Aerospatiale, with the engines that come from SEP, a division of Snecma. Very good day or good evening to you in France.
Extinction du premier étage.
Right. Shutdown of the first stage.
Séparation du premier étage.
Separation
Allumage du deuxième étage.
and ignition of the second stage.
Les paramètres bord sont normaux et la trajectoire est normale.
Graphical representation there on what is happening up in space.
That was a major landmark. First stage is now falling down into the Atlantic Ocean and should splash down rather quickly at the distance of some 1,000 kilometers offshore into the Atlantic.
The next event in the flight path is the jettisoning of the fairing. This is the cover that was hiding Insat from view.
Right.
Largage de la coiffe.
Here we have it. And the protective nose fairing is not needed anymore, since Insat is already, as you can read on the bottom, at more than 120 kilometers above the equator, where there is practically
Les
no
paramètres
atmosphere
bord sont
and
normaux et
the
la trajectoire est normale.
protection is not needed anymore. So the launcher is now free of these some 700 kilograms of weight of the nose fairing, which has been manufactured in Switzerland by Contravis Space and will be falling down also at the distance of some 1,000 kilometers east of Kourou. If we look at the bottom line on the right-hand side, we see the velocity climbing slowly and should reach the target velocity at the orbital injection time of 9.7 kilometers per second. But we still have some 15 minutes to go.
Tous les
165,
paramètres bord sont normaux et la trajectoire est normale.
170 kilometer altitude already.
Right now, propulsion is being provided by the second stage, and it is consuming
Extinction du
30
deuxième étage.
38 tons of propellants in less than 2 minutes.
Séparation deuxième étage.
Separation of the second and third stage.
Allumage du troisième étage.
And ignition of the third cryogenic stage has been announced and confirmed.
That is also a major milestone in this
Tous les
mission.
paramètres bord sont normaux et la trajectoire est normale.
From the 326 tons at liftoff, we're now down to some
15 tons.
15 tons,
yes.
including 11 tons of propellant, those cryogenic fuels.
And the second stage has completed its mission. It was manufactured, assembled in Germany, more precisely in Bremen, by Daimler Chrysler Aerospace. It will be splashing down at a bit more than 2,000 kilometers east of the South American coast.
Acquisition par la station télémesure de Natal au Brésil.
Right, throughout the flight, our launch vehicle is being tracked and followed by ground tracking stations. The first were in French Guiana. Now it is being followed by the station in Natal,
which is sending part of these data in real time to the Kourou station located on the Space Center grounds here. And all the information we see on the lower part of the screen is being sent to us through this telemetry system using several downrange stations. The Natal one in Brazil has a special agreement with the Space Center and provides support to each of the eastward launches, and those are the majority of them, because that's the type of orbit used by most of the telecommunication satellites.
Les paramètres bord sont normaux et la trajectoire est normale.
Just a little word, Juan, about some of the invited guests here whom we've seen just a moment ago on screen. We have quite a sizable delegation from Intelsat, which should be explained in that for the very first time, ISRO is leasing part of its transponder capacity on Insat 2E to Intelsat. In fact, 11 of the 17 transponders will be used by the International Telecommunications Organization. So we say good day and to everybody in Washington following this video transmission. No doubt you're very interested and awaiting the separation of the satellite and its entry into commercial service, I believe, around the 1st of May.
In fact, the footprint or the coverage of Insat for telecommunications has been growing since the 70s and 80s to a global coverage right now, and we can understand that Intelsat is interested in using this satellite because it covers not only India and Asia but also the Australian continent.
8 minutes and 50 seconds into flight, everything is nominal according to the reports. Altitude already 298 practically kilometers. Speed, velocity 5.1 kilometers per second.
And propulsion is being provided by the third stage, which is consuming about 11 tons of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen.
And our launcher is often described, and it is truly that, as an intelligent vehicle. It is guiding itself up to the target point, the point of injection, and this is possible with what we call
the vehicle equipment bay, to use a technical term, which is performing the guidance, the navigation, and the control functions in a fully automated way throughout the mission. And this is 500 kilogram piece of equipment assembled and checked by Matra Marconi Space in Toulouse, France.
Perhaps we can explain, people may be puzzled by the trajectory curve as shown. Do we actually come back a bit closer to Earth with this dip that is shown?
That is correct. In fact, this curve is a little bit different from what we would see if we were in space, because the curve of the round form of the planet Earth has been flattened just for graphical reasons. But indeed, as you say, Martin, the altitude of Ariane will be decreasing, and we can monitor this looking at the second line from bottom.
And the purpose of this is to increase the velocity?
The purpose of this is to make the best use of the propellants on board to reach the satellisation velocity. And the first part of the flight path, as you can see on the left, is quite vertical to make sure that we go across the atmosphere as quickly as possible. And then, as you say, the descending part of the flight path is used to get some additional velocity. Very soon we will be reaching an incredible distance traveled of more than 4,000 kilometers.
On screen is the director of the Guyana Space Center, Monsieur Michel Mignot. Let's say a few words now about the use of this satellite. It is a multi-purpose satellite that we mentioned already, telecommunications. It's interesting, we were told, speaking to the spacecraft team, that there are over 1,000 terrestrial television transmitters throughout India, and all of them rely on their signals on the Insat satellite system. It is a crucial system of distribution of television
Tous les
pictures.
paramètres bord sont normaux et la trajectoire est normale.
All parameters normal on board.
Also, in terms of telecommunications, we were told that it will have a VSAT capacity, and India apparently is one of the countries that is the most equipped with these VSAT small terminals. All this capacity will be used then not just for television for the Indian population, but also for remote learning, for example.
When we were talking about the weather conditions here in French Guiana, Martin, before liftoff, you showed us a weather satellite picture, which came in fact from United States GOES
Les
spacecraft. It
paramètres
is one
bord
of
sont
the satellites
normaux et la
used
trajectoire
here
est normale.
for weather monitoring. Another one is the European-made Meteosat. And I think we should make it clear,
Acquisition
Martin,
par la
that
station télémesure d'Ascension.
the use of weather satellites is not only for rocket launches, is it?
The Ascension Island tracking station that we see now has picked up the launch vehicle. Let's say a few words now about the actual satellite itself, which has a curious appearance. It's not symmetrical with solar generators on each side, and we should be having a picture of it in a few moments' time. It is a satellite of cuboid shape, centrally, with a solar generator on one side, and on the other side there is what we call
Tous les
a
paramètres bord sont normaux
solar
et il
sail.
reste 5 minutes de
We
propulsion.
have some future astronauts also sitting with us.
The meteorology mission is very important for Insat. It'll be surveying the Indian subcontinent in 3 wave bands with its very high resolution radiometer. And the new aspect of this with regard to preceding Insat craft is that it will be measuring water vapor. This measurement and this study, the surveillance of water vapor, will be able to monitor the development of cyclone formation and give advance warnings. We were told, discussing these questions with the Insat team, that it's been estimated that the Insat system has saved 600,000 lives since these satellites have been in orbit, which is an interesting fact.
In fact, Insat, the
Tous
whole
les paramètres sont
Indian
normaux, il
satellite
reste
system
4 minutes de propulsion.
is designed to serve the needs of the Indian subcontinent and to improve the quality of life of a very large population.
Let's say a few words now about Ariane space, as we have under 4 minutes of
One
propulsion.
Right here now on the picture, one of the crucial operations that will be performed once Insat is in its geosynchronous orbit, namely the deployment of the solar array and of the solar sail, reaching an overall span of 25 meters. That's about 8-story building.
A few words now then about our company, Ariane Space, which only 2 days ago announced another contract in the bag, bringing
Tous les
it to
paramètres bord sont
39
normaux, la
satellites to
trajectoire est
launch.
normale.
39 to launch, including this one, so it'll be 38 in a few moments' time.
Perte par les moyennes natales.
The objectives of Ariane Space this year, which we mentioned with Monsieur Donat earlier, 2 flights so far, this second flight, and 9 more flights of Ariane 4, and the most important 3 Ariane 5 flights that are scheduled before the year is out. Many improvements also in French Guiana, Juan, I believe, concerning Ariane 5.
Yes, one of the construction works going on right now here is the building of a new satellite processing facility to allow for a higher launch rate and for larger spacecraft as well as constellation spacecraft. This should be available in about 18 months' time.
And as we mentioned, the improvements that are scheduled to Ariane 5, there is a ministerial meeting of the European Space Agency ministers, which is scheduled later in the spring.
Yes, it is scheduled for 11 and 12 of May of this year in Brussels, and one of the major decisions expected at this ESA Council meeting will be the improvements of the Ariane 5 performance with a new type of cryogenic upper stage, which should increase the performance of Ariane 5 to 11 tons by 2005.
These subjects were constituted a presentation in San Francisco, which ended yesterday, where Ariane Space brought together customers, eventual future customers, to talk about Ariane 5 developments. And one of the developments is that I understand that Ariane 5 has the biggest volume fairing that exists. And just to give you an idea, in January next year, Ariane Space will be launching the European Space Agency X-ray telescope, which is 10 meters tall under the fairing. And it's only the short fairing that we have.
But let's come back from Ariane 5 to our launch tonight. We're using Ariane 4 and we're moving eastwards with Insat 2E on board. In fact, it just happened so that we're getting closer and closer to Bangalore, and we should have visibility from there quite soon. We hope that the climate in Bangalore is better today than it is in Kourou, because we have been told that the region there is called India's Garden City, and it is also called India's Silicon Valley because of its high-tech and space activities.
Right, about 15 seconds more propulsion of this third stage, I just heard.
About 180 kilometers south of Bangalore is the Hassan Satellite Control Station, where we hope the teams are also...
Extinction du troisième étage.
Okay.
Right, we have shut down of the third stage. Now a series of maneuvers are necessary before we actually release our precious satellite.
Début de la manœuvre d'orientation du composite.
The launcher is now under visibility of the Libreville downrange station located in Gabon on the west coast of Africa. So we see we are indeed moving eastwards, and we know that the network of ground stations that are monitored by the Hassan station in India are ready to take over responsibility over the baby, over the Insat 2E spacecraft as soon as it reaches their visibility. In fact, the Hassan station will be controlling a network of 4 other ground stations for the first 5 days of in-orbit operations, and these ground stations are located in Australia, Canada and Italy, and of course Hassan in India.
Just to explain that Ariane is placing our satellite into a temporary transfer orbit, which is elliptical, and using its own propulsion system with 2 burns of an engine, it will raise and circularize this orbit to the geosynchronous orbit that is 36,000 kilometers high.
We see now that the altitude is rising very fast. We just have to watch on the second line from bottom. It is about 1 kilometer per second, getting above the equator. The final orbit to be reached is an elliptical, so-called geostationary transfer orbit, with its lowest point at some 250 kilometers above the Earth, and with its highest point, the apogee, at some 36,000 kilometers.
Tous les paramètres bord sont normaux.
Right, we're only some 30 seconds away from the separation of
perte par les moyens d'ascension.
Insat 2E, the start of life for this last of the Insat 2 generation craft.
The satellite has traveled already more than 6,000
La
kilometers.
phase de SCAR se poursuit normalement.
The orientation
Séparation Insat 2E.
Separation of Insat 2E has been announced, and of course there's warm applause, relief, everybody is happy. Months, sometimes years of effort.
and this is only part of the Ariane mission. The teams we were mentioning, controlled from Hassan, will now be responsible for some crucial operations in the coming days, namely 2 apogee boost motor firings to transform that elliptical transfer orbit into a circular one. That will be followed by the deployment of the solar array and the solar sail. And this early orbit phase should be finished by 17th of April in view of the performance of some in-orbit tests of the equipment for start of commercial activities of Insat 2E in early May of this year.
And Insat 2E is joining several other Insat 2 craft already operational in orbit.
Allumage.
Let's see a replay.
Décollage. Tous les paramètres bord.
Right, our launcher is off. Characteristic white plume of the solid propellant boosters.
The Ariane mission is almost finished, but some important operations are going to happen in the coming minutes. One of them is the depletion of propellants on board the 3rd stage to make sure that there is no explosion and that it stays in one piece. This has a large contribution to the keeping space clean and avoiding the formation of unnecessary space debris. Another operation that is very important for the ISRO, the Insat 2E people, is that Arianespace will be providing them with the exact orbital parameters so that they know where the spacecraft is and how it is oriented towards the Earth, and that they can determine the orbit and they can start those operations we were describing. And we can only wish a long lifetime for Insat 2E, which should be at least 12 years.
One of the things we didn't mention was the entire capacity of Insat 2E has been fully booked up. And in fact, the demand for transponder capacity over the India subcontinent and over the region is so great that ISRO has already planned and built, in fact, a 3rd generation of craft. The first Insat 3 satellite is due to be launched again from Kourou, surprise, surprise, at the end of this year, Insat 3B. There will be 5 satellites in this generation, and no doubt we hope that other Insat 3 satellites also come to Kourou. Off, as seen by other cameras.
Unité, feu. Allumage. Décollage. Tous les paramètres bord.
Now I'd like to say that the next launch will take place, that will be flight 118, that will be on the 28th of April, 44P, and it will be TV direct for New Skies in the Netherlands. So it will be the next launch. It's not Ariane 5 yet. the next launch of Ariane 5 will be mid-June. It will take with it the Telcom satellite and one other satellite, which will maybe be Asiastar, but it will be said very soon. So much for our calendar.
Allumage. Décollage. Tous les paramètres bord. Unité, feu. Allumage. Décollage.